I mean, this playing of the race card in the battle for the Tory leadership, it comes from Lord Ranger, a big prominent supporter of Rishi Sunak, who actually says, and I quote, "If people reject Rishi, it will be a bad name for the party and the country because this will be perceived as racist." I would say that's ridiculous. It's patronising, and it begs the alternative question: if we reject Liz Truss, will we be seen as sexist?
Absolutely, and actually Lord Ranger, in making that comment, is himself being racist. He's suggesting that, you know, colour should play a part in this leadership contest. We should be colour blind. We should be sex blind. That's how we were brought up. I know nowadays you've actually got to be positively in favour of racial minorities, sexual minorities, your predilections, your religious beliefs. You know, we have to champion the minorities of everyone to the detriment of the majority. That seems to be the modern way. But actually the way I was brought up, and I think the only way, frankly, to get rid of racism and prejudice in society is to be blind to all of this, to be blind to your colour, blind to your sex, blind to your ideology, blind to your sexual preferences and so on. And the fact that he should do that, it's just dog whistle politics, isn't it? And it's wrong. And anyway, if you look back at the candidates who first stood for election, who did we have? We had Suella Braverman, who's a woman with, you know...
of colour, of course.
Of colour. Kemi Badenoch, Nadeem Zahawi, and Rishi Sunak. You had a multiplicity of different ethnicities. And I know people kept saying the Tory party's racist. It's not racist. We are not an institutionally racist country. We are not racist fundamentally in any shape or form. I know there's been a big furore over the Scottish cricket team recently over racism. Even that I find difficult to fathom. You know, and I think we've just got to get over this, and we've got to start looking at people for who they are and what their qualities and attributes are and what contribution they make to the United Kingdom, and cease this dog whistle politics.
Absolutely, and I think the candidates, when there were 5 or 6 of them for the leadership, were a tribute to the diversity in the Tory party.
Absolutely. Sajid Javid, I forgot Sajid Javid. He was there for 5 minutes, wasn't he?
And Zahawi, and so on and so forth. But let's get back to the 2 remaining candidates. I believe you're backing Liz Truss. I would like to see her win the race because I think basically Rishi Sunak is actually learning fast that his initial tack of vote for me, more of the same, more tax rises, you know, the pound in your pocket won't go very far. If I'm your Prime Minister, it will cost you a fortune. He's come to realise that wasn't necessarily a good campaign stance.
Well, I mean, Rishi Sunak is riven with self-contradiction. You know, he talks about this desire not to foist debt on our children and their children and so on, but he forgets that he was the Chancellor that actually raised national debt by 500 billion. That's a whopping 30% of our national debt. 500 billion, that's all the borrowings of the government in all of history up to 2005. He did that in 2 years. So when he talks about a debt legacy, he's absolutely driven that, you know, beyond all boundaries. Then he talks about how high taxation is important in order to curb inflation. Well, he took taxes to a post-war high before inflation showed itself. And that didn't prevent inflation from emerging. So why does he think that high taxes now are going to subdue inflation? It doesn't work like that. Liz Truss understands, and I think it's patently obvious to anyone who gives it cursory analysis, that if you reduce tax on goods, such as VAT on fuel, VAT on goods, tax on fuel itself, tax on alcohol, tobacco and the rest of it. If you reduce those taxes, you immediately reduce the cost of those goods. You reduce inflation. And the primary battle right now that this country has economically is with inflation. So Rishi just doesn't get it. And I think he's beginning to see he's not getting it because he reversed his position on green taxes on fuel, didn't he?
Yes, and also VAT on energy bills. So it's a bit like, if you don't like my tax opinions, I have others. Now, Rishi-nomics, they call it. You know, he is doomed, isn't he, I think?
Yeah, I think he's doomed. I don't think he's honest. He's not an honest individual, frankly.
The furlough scheme, which he likes to boast about, the fact of the matter is, Liz is in a difficult position because she's part of the cabinet that backed the ever-extended furlough scheme. But it went on for far too long.
Far too long.
That's why we're in trouble now.
Yeah. I mean, look, we have to appreciate that the reason we have a cost of living crisis is because of lockdowns. It's been exacerbated by Ukraine, but it wasn't caused by Ukraine. We depleted our fuel reserves during lockdown. We didn't prepare for unlocking. We didn't understand what we needed to do in order to get the private sector back on its feet once we unlocked. And these tax cuts that Liz Truss is talking about actually should have come in immediately on our unlocking. And some people watching their screens now will say, well, it's fine for Ben Habib to have 2020 hindsight vision. Actually, I wrote to the government in June 2020 saying that when we unlock, it is vital that we reduce taxes on what I call turnover, things like VAT, national insurance was one of the things I highlighted to the government. These are taxes that should have been reduced as we came out of lockdown so that the British economy could have got back on its feet. Instead, those taxes were kept high, inflation was allowed to rip, and the Chancellor did nothing to get ahead of the problem. And he's still failing to get ahead of the problem. This winter, we are now forecast that the average fuel bill is going to be £500 a month.
I know.
That is 30% of the average wage people take home. That is shocking on net terms.
And we know that in October, when the price cap changes, that actually the bills will go up at that point to £3,300, or the average household bill will go up to £3,300 a year. As you say, then there's going to be another price cap change in January, and they may bring in more and more price cap changes, and that may go up to £500 a month. But even in October, £3,300, that will, they predict, plunge 10 million people below the poverty line.
Yeah.
And if you're a pensioner living on your state pension, that's a third of your income. That's unsustainable, unacceptable.
Absolutely. So you have to back the candidate that's got a vision of how to deal with it. And whatever Liz Truss's inability to be as slick as Rishi Sunak, forget about that. Her policies are the key thing, and her policy of getting ahead of this cost of living crisis is the principal reason why we must all back Liz Truss. Rishi would condemn this country not just to cost of living problems, but remember this too, Kevin. You know, when inflation stays high, people demand extra wages. You get strikes. You get other adverse consequences flowing through the economy. And when wages go up dramatically, you get embedded inflation, because that fuels this vicious circle out of which Rishi will not be able to get. The only way to deal with this problem is to cut taxes. And Rishi simply does not understand that.